The alien pilot closed her eyes because she believed she was about to die. And the strange thing was, she felt relief. But when her eyes opened again, a human was standing over her. That moment would change the fate of 2 civilizations. The battlefield of Zyra, 12 burned under a crimson sky. Broken spacecraft littered the ground like fallen giants. Smoke twisted upward through alien trees whose silver leaves reflected the fires of war. The smell of plasma and metal filled the air. Commander Seren Vallis lay half-buried beneath the wreckage of her fighter craft. Her breathing was slow and painful. The war between the Orothai Empire and the Human Alliance had been brutal. Entire star systems had fallen. Fleets had vanished in silence. And now, Seren was alone. Her leg armor was shattered. Purple blood seeped into the black soil of the forest planet. Her comm unit crackled once. Then it died. No rescue. No signal. No hope. Seren slowly closed her glowing silver eyes. "Let it end," she whispered. The wind moved through the burning forest. Then she heard something strange. Footsteps. Heavy. Uneven. Not Orothai. Not a drone. Something else. She opened her eyes again. And there he was. A human. He stood above her in scratched combat armor, holding an outdated rifle across his shoulder like it weighed nothing. His dark hair was messy. Dirt covered half his face. But his eyes were bright and focused. Very alive. "Well," the human said casually, crouching beside her. "You look like you've had a worse day than me." Seren stared at him in disbelief. A human soldier. The enemy. And he was just talking. "You should finish it," she said weakly through her translator implant. Her hand moved toward where her sidearm should have been. "Gone." The human shook his head. "Nah," he replied. He opened a small pack and pulled out a medical injector. "I'm more of a save people type." Seren blinked slowly. "You realize I am your enemy?" "Yep." "And this is a battlefield?" "Also yep." "And if I recover, I may kill you." The human thought about that for exactly 1 second. "Yeah," he said. "Still gonna help you." Before she could protest, he pressed the injector against her neck. Warm energy spread through her body as human nanits rushed into her bloodstream. Her wounds stopped bleeding almost instantly. Her mind struggled to process it. "Why?" she asked. The human shrugged. "Because leaving someone to die in the dirt just feels wrong." He reached under the wreckage and slowly lifted the metal panel trapping her arm. The strength surprised her. Humans were not supposed to be this strong. "Name's Caleb Torres," he said. "Marine Corps, or at least what's left of it." Seren studied his face. "You are insane." "Probably." He grinned. "But hey, insanity has a pretty good survival rate so far." A distant mechanical sound echoed through the forest. Seren's ears twitched. Her eyes widened. "Reckon drones," she whispered. Caleb immediately looked toward the sky. Small black shapes moved between the clouds. Orothai hunter drones. They were scanning the battlefield. If they detected Caleb, they would erase him instantly. "You must leave," Seren said urgently. "They will kill you." Caleb grabbed her arm. "Can you walk?" "No." "Great," he muttered. "Then this just got complicated." Without hesitation, Caleb lifted her over his shoulder. The sudden motion shocked her. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Not dying today," Caleb said. "Plan is still forming, but step 1 is leaving this burning mess." The drones buzzed closer. Their scanners pulsed blue across the ground. Caleb ran. He crashed through the alien forest, dodging shattered trees and molten debris. Seren could feel his heartbeat pounding through his armor. Strong. Fast. Fearless. "You're making a mistake," she told him. "Probably." He jumped across a collapsed trench. But humans are pretty famous for those. The forest thickened. Giant crystal plants glowed faintly in the darkness. Caleb slid behind a massive stone ridge. The drones passed overhead. Silent. Searching. Then they were gone. Caleb exhaled slowly. Okay, he said. Step 2 of the plan. Figure out step 2. Seren looked at him carefully. You saved me, she said quietly. Yes. Even though I am your enemy. Yes. Her eyes narrowed. You humans are strange. Caleb laughed. Yeah. We hear that a lot. Seren leaned back against the rock. For the first time since the crash, she felt something unexpected. Hope. And deep inside her mind, a strange thought formed. Maybe the humans were not the monsters the Empire believed. Maybe they were something far more dangerous. Because humans didn't just fight. Humans cared. And sometimes that made them unstoppable. By dawn, the forest had changed. The fires behind them had finally begun to die, but the silence that replaced them felt worse. On Zyra 12, silence was never empty. It meant something was waiting. Caleb Torres knew that feeling well. He crouched beside the mouth of a narrow stone hollow while the first grey light slipped through the giant crystal leaves overhead. The shelter was little more than a crack in the earth, hidden behind roots and black rock, but for one night, it had kept them alive. That was enough. A few feet behind him, Commander Seren Vallis sat with her back against the wall, one hand pressed against her injured side. The human nanits had stopped the worst of the damage, but she was still weak. Her silver skin had lost some of its dullness, and the light had returned to her eyes, but Caleb could see the pain every time she moved. You should sleep, he said quietly. Seren looked up from the small alien scanner in her hand. And you should stop pretending you are not exhausted. Caleb smiled faintly. Fair point. He leaned back against the rock and checked the power cell on his rifle. Low. Very low. Perfect. Everything today seemed to be low. Ammo, food, power, chances. But humans had built entire civilizations with less. Seren studied him for a moment. You are thinking too hard again. That obvious? To my people, yes. Caleb rubbed his face. I was just trying to think of a way out. She glanced toward the forest. There may not be one. He looked at her. That line right there? That is exactly why humans make bad decisions. She tilted her head. Explain. Because the moment someone says there's no way out, a human brain starts acting like it's a personal insult. For the first time that morning, Seren's mouth almost curved into a smile. Almost. Then her scanner flashed red. Both of them froze. Seren's expression changed immediately. Movement, she whispered. 3 ground units. 2 aerial. Closing fast. Caleb exhaled through his nose. Well, he said softly, looks like the universe heard me bragging. He crawled closer to her and looked at the scanner. The dots were spreading outward in a fan pattern. Not random. Systematic. They are herding us, he said. Seren nodded. Toward open ground. The drones will strike once we are exposed. Caleb glanced at the forest map on her device. A jagged ravine cut across the land to the west. To the east stood an old mining field filled with abandoned drilling towers and collapsed tunnels. He pointed west. Ravine. Too open. He pointed east. Mine field. Seren frowned. Unstable, narrow, full of magnetic dust, broken machinery, and collapsed energy pipes. Caleb's eyes brightened. That, he said, is the most beautiful thing I've heard all day. Seren stared at him. You want to run into the dangerous death maze. Correct. That is not a plan. It is if you're human. Before she could argue, Caleb stood and held out a hand. Come on, Commander. Time to put your faith in terrible ideas. She looked at his hand, then at his face. He was serious. Insane, but serious. After one long second, she took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They moved through the trees fast, Caleb supporting part of her weight while the scanner pulsed in her grip. The sounds of pursuit grew louder behind them. A low hum in the sky. Metallic feet striking stone. The enemy was close enough now that Seren could identify the pattern. Not Orathai, she said suddenly. Caleb looked at her. What? She stopped near a fallen crystal trunk. These signals, they are not Imperial. His face hardened. Then whose? Seren's expression darkened. The Varkesh Dominion. Even Caleb, who knew only fragments of galactic politics, had heard the name. The Varkesh were raiders. Opportunists. A species that thrived in broken systems and border wars. They sold weapons, stole planets, and harvested survivors from battlefields for labor or worse. Caleb looked back toward the trees. So they waited for us to weaken each other. Yes. And now they're cleaning up. Yes. He gave a bitter laugh. Wow. Space really does have pirates. Seren didn't answer. She was listening. Then she said, they will not take prisoners we can survive becoming. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then let's disappoint them. They reached the mining field minutes later. It was a graveyard of old industry. Towering metal rigs leaned at impossible angles. Broken conveyor arms hung over cracked earth. Thick cables snaked through pools of red mud. Strange silver dust floated in the air like fog, sticking to armor and skin. Caleb looked around once and grinned. Oh, this place is perfect. Seren turned to him sharply. You cannot be serious. I am extremely serious. He ran toward a collapsed control station, ripping open broken panels, dragging out wires and old battery packs. He moved fast, hands sure, mind racing ahead of itself. Seren followed, confused. What are you doing? Making a lie, he said. She blinked. What? Caleb pointed at the dust in the air. This stuff reacts to energy, right? Yes. It distorts sensors and amplifies charge. And those old drill towers? They used focused pulse beams. Caleb smiled wider. Great. Then we're about to convince a bunch of pirate killers that they found a human battalion with heavy weapons. Seren stared at him. That is absurd. That, Caleb said, yanking free a power core, is why it might work. The first drone entered the mining field 30 seconds later. It hovered above the broken ground, scanning. Then Caleb slammed 2 exposed wires together. The entire field came alive. A pulse ripped through the old towers. Red dust exploded upward in glowing clouds. Dead machinery began to spark and howl. A line of broken signal beacons flashed in sequence across the ruins, reflecting off the mineral haze until the whole mine looked full of moving light and armed positions. Seren understood at once. To clean sensors, it would look like dozens of targets. Dozens of human energy signatures. Moving. A trap. The drone immediately banked away and transmitted an alarm. Caleb laughed. Oh, they bought it. They actually bought it. Then the ground shook. A deep horn echoed across the mine. Seren's expression changed. That is not retreat, she said. Caleb turned. From the far ridge, armored Varkesh troops began pouring into the field anyway. Not cautious. Not fooled. Angry. At their center walked a massive figure in dark-plated armor, taller than any human, carrying a shock axe across one shoulder. Seren's voice dropped. War Captain Drav. Caleb looked at the approaching force. Well, he muttered, he looks friendly. He is a butcher. Even better. Seren grabbed his arm. There are too many. Caleb looked at the unstable towers, the dust clouds, the broken energy pipes buried beneath the ground. Then he looked at the advancing pirates. And the human smile returned. Too many for a fair fight, he said. He tore open another panel and shoved a battery pack into Seren's hands. But fair fights are overrated. Her eyes narrowed. What are you about to do? Caleb pointed across the field. See that main drilling spine? Yes. If we overload it, the whole magnetic line under this mine wakes up. Her eyes widened. The pipes will rupture. Exactly. The towers will collapse. hopefully on our extremely rude guests. Seren stared at him in disbelief. This field could tear itself apart. Caleb checked the charge on the last power cell. Then I guess we should leave right before that happens. The Varkesh war captain lifted his axe and roared. His troops charged. Caleb handed Seren the trigger line. When I say run, he said, do not argue. Do not stop. And absolutely do not come back for me. She looked at the wire in her hand. Then at him. And if I refuse? Caleb glanced at the storm of enemies racing toward them through the dust. Commander, he said softly, humans are at their best when someone needs saving. He slammed his final power cell into the control spine. The dead mine began to scream awake. And for the first time since the war began, Seren realized something terrifying for every species that had ever underestimated Earth. Humans did not need perfect weapons. They did not need superior fleets. They only needed one impossible idea, and enough courage to try it. The mine began to scream. Not metaphorically. Literally. The ancient drilling towers groaned like wounded giants waking from a long sleep. Rusted metal vibrated. Cracked cables snapped tight. Beneath the ground, miles of forgotten magnetic pipelines suddenly surged with power. Commander Seren Vallis felt it instantly. The entire valley was becoming unstable, and Caleb Torres had just turned it into a weapon. Across the mining field, War Captain Drav stopped mid-charge. His massive armored frame tilted slightly as his battlefield sensors tried to understand what was happening. Red dust swirled violently. Energy spikes appeared everywhere. The field looked alive. His warriors hesitated. That single second of hesitation was all Caleb needed. Run, he shouted. Seren didn't argue. For once, she obeyed. She sprinted toward the shattered ridge at the far edge of the mine, her injured leg screaming in protest. Behind her, Caleb slammed the final control switch into place and dove away from the control tower. The first explosion hit. A drilling tower collapsed sideways with a thunderous crash. Magnetic pipelines ruptured beneath the ground, releasing violent arcs of blue energy that surged through the metallic dust in the air. The entire valley turned into a storm of lightning and collapsing machinery. Varkesh soldiers scattered in panic. Their armor systems malfunctioned instantly as the charged mineral dust overloaded their targeting computers. One of the giant towers snapped in half and crashed directly into the center of their formation. War Captain Drav roared in fury. He swung his shock axe, cutting down a falling cable as sparks burst around him. Human trickery, he bellowed. But it was already too late. Another explosion ripped through the mine. The ground cracked open like glass. Energy pipes burst upward, throwing burning debris into the air. The storm of dust amplified the electrical chaos until the entire battlefield looked like a lightning hurricane. Seren reached the ridge and turned. She expected to see Caleb behind her. He wasn't there. Her heart froze. Through the dust storm she saw him, still inside the mine, running straight toward the center of the collapsing machinery. "What are you doing?" she shouted into the wind. Caleb didn't answer. He was sprinting toward the largest tower in the field. The main drilling spine. The structure that held the entire mine together. Seren's eyes widened in horror. No. Caleb reached the tower just as another blast shook the ground. He grabbed a loose cable and slammed it into the exposed core of the tower's generator. The machine roared. Energy flooded through the old mining grid. And suddenly every remaining tower in the valley activated at once. To the Varkesh sensors, it looked like dozens of heavy weapons firing simultaneously. To reality, it looked like the entire mine exploding. A wall of energy erupted across the battlefield. Towers collapsed. Shockwaves ripped through the dust clouds. Varkesh troops were thrown backward as the unstable terrain broke apart beneath them. Even War Captain Drav staggered. And in the middle of that chaos, Caleb finally turned and ran. He ran toward the ridge where Seren waited. But he didn't run fast enough. One of the collapsing towers fell behind him. The ground cracked open. A blast wave surged outward like a tidal wave of fire and metal. Seren didn't think. She ran back toward him. Caleb saw her coming and shouted, "No!" But she was already there. She grabbed his arm and threw him forward just as the shockwave hit. Both of them were blasted across the ridge. They tumbled down the rocky slope, sliding through dust and broken stone until they crashed behind a thick outcrop of crystal rock. The explosion behind them lit the sky like a second sun. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Caleb groaned. "Well," he muttered weakly, "that escalated quickly." Seren sat up slowly, breathing hard. Behind them, the entire mining valley had collapsed into a massive crater of twisted metal and smoking earth. The Varkesh army was gone, buried under the ruins. Caleb looked at the destruction and whistled softly. "Note to self," he said. "Never complain about human engineering again." Seren stared at the crater. Then she looked at him. "You destroyed an entire army, using scrap machinery." Caleb shrugged. "Improvisation." She shook her head slowly. "No, something else." At that moment, a deep rumble echoed through the sky. Both of them looked up. 3 large ships descended through the clouds. Orathai warships. Seren's people had arrived. Caleb sighed. "Well, that's awkward." Armored drop pods streaked toward the ground. Moments later, elite Orathai soldiers surrounded the ridge. Weapons raised. Scanning. Ready to fire. Their commander stepped forward. A tall alien woman with silver armor and glowing blue eyes. Seren's sister. Commander Nereth Valis. Her gaze locked instantly on Caleb. Then on Seren. Then on the crater behind them. Her voice was cold. "Explain." Seren stood slowly. She looked at Caleb. Then at her sister. "The humans saved my life." Silence fell over the soldiers. Neretha's eyes narrowed. "And the destroyed Varkesh battalion." Seren turned toward the crater. "The human did that too." The soldiers murmured. Even Nereth looked stunned. She studied Caleb carefully. The dirt-covered human in damaged armor who had just wiped out an army using abandoned mining equipment. "You fought alone?" she asked. Caleb scratched the back of his head. "Well, technically I had help." He gestured toward Seren. "She yelled at me a lot." A few Orathai soldiers looked confused. Others looked impressed. Nereth stepped closer. "For generations," she said slowly, "the Orathai Empire believed humans were reckless." Caleb smiled slightly. "That's fair." "But now," she continued, looking at the destroyed battlefield, "I believe we misunderstood something." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Neretha's voice grew quiet. "You are not reckless." She looked at the smoking crater again. "You are creative." Seren watched Caleb carefully. For the first time since she had met him, the human looked almost embarrassed. "Well," he said casually, "sometimes the best plan is just a really bad idea that refuses to fail." The Orathai soldiers slowly lowered their weapons. And in that moment, something historic happened. Not a victory, not a surrender, but something much rarer. Respect. Because across the stars, powerful civilizations had long believed strength meant advanced weapons, perfect strategy, superior fleets. But humanity had just demonstrated something far more dangerous. Humans did not rely on perfect plans. Humans relied on imagination. And imagination was impossible to defeat.
Aber gerade vorhin sah es schon mehr aus, als würde es von da hinten kommen.
Ja, aber die Fahnen passen nicht zusammen.
Die Fahne wird doch immer noch in die Richtung.
Nee, weil die von links kriegt mehr Wind auf uns zu und die anderen mehr.
Nee, das ist schon dieselbe Richtung. Das ist schon diese, ja, die weht so leicht an unserem Auto vorbei und die ja auch in die Richtung. Die da hinten ja auch. Das weht schon alles in dieselbe Richtung. Wenn ich das so richtig beobachte. Und normalerweise müsste das doch hier die Quellungslinie sein, wo es dann später auslöst, oder? Meinst du, es entsteht hier noch was? Auf der Linie. Kann auch sein. Hier gehen jetzt überall Quellungen hoch. Hier.
Ja
Gut, die sind da hinten mittendrin, du siehst ja selbst, was hier hochgeht. Ne? Da ist jetzt aber auch nichts Höheres dabei und wenn du das mal genauer guckst, die trocknen da oben ja auch schon wieder weg. Das kommt erst noch rein. Mit dem da oben, denke ich mal.